but her. Right. Okay, I would like to welcome everybody today to our called City Council meeting on Thursday, April 16th. And we appreciate all the folks who are here with us, and also anyone else who's joining us either live or watching later. Tara Music, can you call the roll?
Okay. Fire Robin?
Here.
Keene?
Here.
Powers?
Mutely.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Luttrell?
Here.
Turner?
Here.
Right, thank you very much. Mr. Sora, I think you're going to introduce who's here with us just for an overview, and then you could, and then I'll talk about the electronic meeting before we hear from our health department.
Yes, be glad to. Speaking of our health department, we have Director Gary Mays and Dr. Stephen May on the line to respond to any questions and to give you a brief update as to the virus this morning. We also have our Housing Authority Chairperson, Ms. Ella King, and also the Director, Steve Cyphers, who will be giving a presentation shortly. And then from a staff standpoint, we have City Recorder Tara Music, City Attorney Danielle Smith, have Director of Parks and Recreation Terry Napier, Director of Economic Development Tom Anderson, and Under Director of Community Relations John Luttrell on the line.
Thank you very much. And each of these meetings that we are holding by electronic we have to acknowledge that there is a need for our doing that. So Ms. Smith, if you want to just briefly say something and we'll all say yes.
Certainly, Mayor. The governor in his executive order 16 did lift the provisions of the Open Meetings Act to the extent that governing bodies can meet electronically if it's necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. And so at each meeting where you're going to meet electronically, you should, as a governing body, make a finding that it's necessary to protect the health and welfare of Tennesseans to meet in such a fashion rather than meeting physically in one location. So.
All right, so council members, did we make that recognition?
Yes.
Yes.
Agreed. Yes.
Thank you very much. Also, I'll just note a couple things that we thank our IT folks for working with us. Also, we are using Zoom, which is in the news quite a bit, and we know our IT people are working to make that as secure as possible. And I will note that I did talk ahead of time to Vice Mayor Luttrell that if I have trouble with my computer connection, that he is prepared to take over. And if he has problems, somebody else can take over. So anyway, sometimes my connection is a little unstable with everybody else using the lines. Director Gary Mays and Dr. May, we welcome you very much. We appreciate the time that it takes for you to be here and welcome some update from you all.
Thank you, Mayor Fire Robin, and I want to thank you and the council for inviting me. It's always a pleasure for us to appear before the council and give an update on public health activities. Of course, the subject is COVID-19. Dr. May has some updated information, statistics locally and statewide that he'll share with you, of course. And I do want to, I guess, give you some insight into where the health department activities are focused, short-term and long-term. Short-term, we are expediting our testing capabilities. Beginning next week, we will open up testing to anyone in the community by appointment, and folks can call our 279-2777 number to arrange for an appointment, and that will be drive-through testing. And our folks are gearing up and getting ready for that, and we're excited to finally get into a broader based testing mode. We desperately need to do that to understand our disease in Sullivan County, and we expect to be doing this for as long as we can get specimens and lab capacity will be there for us. Currently, we have just a little less than 500 specimens, but we've asked for more, and we do anticipate receiving more specimens. So we will continue to do that and get that delivered expeditiously to the public and to officials like the council to give them insight into disease status. Another project that we see our role shifting somewhat, but traditionally public health always is in the business of detecting disease, isolating disease, and so on. And we believe COVID will end up in that same area. So we're tooling up on a bigger scale than what we are accustomed to in public health in Sullivan County. So we are seeking funds at the federal and state and county level to give us the expertise and the capacity to do disease detection and isolation, cluster follow-up, and so on and so forth to help contain the disease. And that will put us in a better position in terms of should the governor and or the president open up, if you will, is a term that's being used. And so we're preparing for that as fast as we can. And we do see that as being our role, at least for a couple of years. I think we'll be doing this. at least until a vaccine is delivered. If that should ever happen, then we'll partner with all of our healthcare partners in Sullivan County and expeditiously administer vaccine. Let's hope that day will come. And so without further ado, I'll kick it over to Dr. May, let him review, and then Mayor, if you would like, we will be able to take questions.
Okay, just a
Thank you.
situational update, looking at both national, state, and local levels. On a national level, we see the death rate at about 4.8%. However, in Tennessee, we're only seeing a death rate of about 2.2%. So we're in much better shape than some other parts of the country with much higher death rates. Current numbers in Tennessee, in Sullivan County, is we have 44 cases, 30 have recovered, 1 death, and currently 2 in the hospital. When we look at the modeling patterns, we know that our peak is predicted to be today. And we're very fortunate in that we're only at about 25% of what was of our maximal capacity to deal with cases. So we've done a good job with that. Our social distancing score, though, however, is not so great. As of 4/15, we received an F grade for social distancing measures, at least for Sullivan County. Tennessee overall was a D-. So that's concerning. And the Vanderbilt health policy modeling came out yesterday, and basically when we started into this, we had an R0 of 5, which means that one person was infecting 5 other people, and thus we saw the rapid rate increase across the state, particularly in Nashville and in Western Tennessee. However, the current predictions with the social distancing model drops it down to 1.4. Now, that's not below the critical 1.0 when disease tends to fade out. We also know the bulk of our population remains susceptible to this disease, and we can expect with revised modeling about 4.5% of those patients will require hospitalization. So that's Tennessee is approaching what they're calling a plateau in the number of disease and disease cases. And based on what we do from here, whether it's easing up or holding the course or even more restrictive measures, which I don't anticipate, but that will determine where we go to from here. And as such, this concept of disease detection followed by rapid isolation and quarantine of all contacts to that case is going to be the major mitigating strategy. Today in the world, Japan is seeing a second wave that has begun, and this began 2 to 3 weeks after they lifted a lot of their social distancing measures. So we'll have to see how Japan deals with that again as they go through this in waves. So also, the Vanderbilt model validates that the rural regions tend to follow 1 to 2 weeks behind the major metropolitan areas. And that certainly seems to be the type of curve that we're getting here in Sullivan County. And Gary's already mentioned our ramping up and increasing of testing capabilities. So I'll answer any questions you all may have for me now.
Yeah, Dr. May, I have one question. With regards to the F and D rating that we have in Tennessee and Sullivan County regarding social distancing, where are we seeing the most of that at as the main contributors?
Well, right now, this study is done, I think, based off cell phone tracking and movement. Sullivan County, particularly over the Easter holiday, really had a rough road to hoe as far as social distancing. There was just not a lot of it going on. Prior to that, we had come up to a C in our social distancing measures.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and I assume, I mean, it is what it is, so it's difficult to, it gives an overview, gives comparison, et cetera. So we don't know what all those people are doing if they're driving around or out and having social contacts, but it compares with other areas. So other questions?
Dr. Mays, over the next couple of weeks, I know y'all will be probably looking at measures to return. That's not to say that in 2 weeks we will return, but what do you see as the most essential measures that we can all practice in addition to the social distancing?
Well, a large piece of this is going to be on the public health side, looking at disease identification and that isolation and quarantine of any of those suspects. And we'll have to hold the pressure on, particularly on those that have to be isolated and quarantined to keep them from spreading it to other people. But otherwise, it's still the basic measures: washing your hands, not touching your face, social distancing less than 6 feet. And the other thing that I've not really been seeing a lot of, particularly in our area, is the social use of masks out in public, particularly in where you're going to be in groups of people. Let's say you go to Home Depot, go to Walmart. There's not a lot of masking being used. Now, understand that mask is to protect you from giving it to somebody else. So it's a little bit different concept in that we're trying to keep people with asymptomatic disease or viral carriage from transmitting it to other people unknowingly. And that's where the social practice of wearing a mask out in public makes a difference. We now recognize this is being transmitted up to 48 hours before you get symptoms. And those are the people we don't know about that are transmitting it to other people.
And if
Thank
I
you.
may add to that, it's a great question, but understand we have only tested approximately 500 or so folks in Sullivan County. And as Dr. May said, a very important note is that all of us are susceptible to the disease, and that's 157,000 people. So until we get our arms around understanding the scope of the disease, social distancing, hand washing is our best tool in the toolbox, and the mask and the PPE, and it's so important. So should our leaders open up, if you will, that will be our best defense, and to keep us in the single-digit new case per day count.
And so you're saying our best defense, if you'd say that one more time, Gary, for those that are watching.
Our best defense against this disease is our messaging from the very beginning: social distancing, hand washing, PPE. The general public wearing a mask is highly recommended now, and avoid contact with those that are sick. In other words, treat everyone else as if they are sick, and let's keep our spread down until we can understand better about the scope and the penetration of the disease.
Thank you.
I've got a question of the testing that will happen this weekend. Will you be able to tell if there are any of those people who have had the disease in the past, so they've already had it? And
Okay, the testing that we're going to be doing is still the detection of the virus itself. So it is a PCR test. Now, the antibody tests are not available yet. The antibody test that we hope to get in the next few weeks will give us an idea of what percent or penetrance into the population have we actually had, and able to say, well, this person may have immunity at least in the short term because their antibodies are positive. The current test we're doing detects the virus, but it also has a shortcoming in that if you are not secreting the virus, or we don't get a good specimen, then that test will be falsely negative. You can still be positive the next day or the day after that. So it is looking at who is actively transmitting that virus. So our real focus has to be on people who have any type of respiratory symptoms at all. Their first test needs to be for this rapid virus testing. The other downfall is we still have delays in getting those results back. The test, anybody who's sick or has respiratory symptoms should still be following the isolation rule of at least 7 days, with the last 3 days at least being well. In some places, it's taking us 5, 6, 7 days to get these tests back. The capacity is increasing every day. They're still trying to increase their speed, but just getting a test today, 1, you may not have the virus. 2, we may not have the result of the test. And so thus the concept, we have to assume everybody is infected until we rule that out.
And Dr. May, why don't you note the sampling method we're using for the citizens of Bristol and why?
I didn't understand your question.
The nasal swab versus some of the other testing that's going on.
Oh, I'm with you. Currently, the best type of specimen to obtain is a nasal pharyngeal specimen. And to explain that to you in a simple basis is basically we take a swab, we come through the base of the nose, going along the whole roof of the mouth, all the way back almost to the front of the ear to collect the specimen, because that is the most sensitive area where the virus grows and where we get the best results. Oropharyngeal testing is marginal at best. So getting like a throat culture like you're used to for strep or anything like that is marginal. And so we're not going to be doing self-swabbing because it's almost impossible for a person to self-swab their nasal pharyngeal region because it is not a pleasant collection. And so self-swabbing has been found not to be very effective. So we will have professionals that will be collecting those specimens through the cars without them getting out, minimizing exposure, but we'll be collecting that with professionals doing the nasal pharyngeal swab, which is a whole lot different than the oral pharyngeal swab. That answer your question, Gary?
Yeah, yes, thank you. I thought it was important to note that difference.
Okay, any other questions? We thank you very, very much for the update you provide to us. We appreciate knowing what we can, and also appreciate that through these meetings you're also reaching the public. So appreciate everything our health department's doing to work with everyone during this time. So, and if there's anything that we need to be doing that can be communicated to us, we as council, as a city, just let us know. We're hand in hand working with you guys. Oops, not hand in hand, not side by side. Anyway, we're working with you and supporting in every way we can. So with that, if you don't have anything else to add to our discussion, we can let y'all go if you need to and move along on our agenda. So.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, I appreciate the opportunity, and I just want to express my appreciation to the city of Bristol and to you and the council for leadership. City Manager Sora has been unbelievable to work with and a tremendous asset in this effort. And I just think the city of Bristol is very fortunate to have the leaders that we do. And we really are excited to have leadership, and we need your leadership to share the messaging, to reinforce the messaging to the public, keep this disease down as much as possible in Sullivan County. And and be particularly mindful of nursing homes and the extended care facilities, and let's keep them safe as well. And anyone in the council, of course, can reach out to Dr. May, and I'm very thankful for Dr. May and his outstanding leadership and tremendous long hours. I've learned that Dr. May actually gets better the less sleep he gets. So I didn't know that until this crisis. But thank you again for the opportunity, and I hope everyone has a good day.
Well, let's hope that that he'll hit a plateau and not hit a high peak and crash. So
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So anyway, thank you all very, very much. All right, bye-bye. So April is traditionally, it is Fair Housing Month. So we thought it would be great to take this opportunity of this called meeting to have a proclamation and then have a little bit of update from our housing folks. So Lee Powers is prepared to read a proclamation, and then Mr. Soar, if you want to introduce our guests for an update after she's done.
Thank you, Mayor. Whereas April 2020 marks the 52nd anniversary of the enactment of the Fair Housing Act, and whereas legislation passed by Congress in 1968 seeks to eliminate discrimination in opportunities and to affirmatively make housing choices available for all Americans, and whereas the ongoing efforts to ensure equal housing opportunity for all citizens is not the exclusive role of the federal government, but also requires state and local government efforts to combat housing discrimination as well. And whereas the city of Bristol, Tennessee utilizes the Department of Development Services to implement an effective and responsible fair housing program, and whereas it is the intent of this city council to encourage the unified efforts of federal, state, and local governments in promoting housing opportunities for all Americans, now therefore be it resolved that Mayor Margaret Firerobbin of the city of Bristol, Tennessee does hereby proclaim April 2020 as Fair Housing Month. This the 16th day of April 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Soar?
It's our pleasure to have with us this morning Chairperson Ella King, who's the chair of the Commission for Bristol Housing, and also their Executive Director, Steve Cyphers. Council may recall during our February meeting, there was a discussion regarding housing and a desire to have representation from Bristol Housing speak to City Council about the programs that they offer. Subsequent to that conversation, I spent some time with Steve Cyphers, and he talked with me about, I think, a different direction that HUD would like to see the various local housing authorities consider, and it's a total different programmatic approach. But with that, I'll give you Ms. Kane and Mr. Cyphers, and they can talk through the Bristol housing situation.
Well, good morning from 204 Bluff City Highway. That's our admin office. I have been working from the office rather than home. I feel like I need to lead by example, and that's what I'm doing. And I think that gives our residents a better sense that we haven't deserted them. So we do have a skeleton staff working. Like Mr. Sora said, Ella Kane is here with me. She is my board chair, and she is starting her third term, and those are 5-year terms, and thank you all for reappointing her. And so this is her 11th year with me, and she has been absolutely great to work with, so thank you, Ella. I've been with the Housing Authority now coming up on 21 years. 20 of those have been as executive director, and a couple of years ago my title was changed to CEO. Several years ago, we took a little more people-friendly look at housing authorities and try to get away from the term government housing. I've never liked that term. I think it has, I feel like it's derogatory. And if you work in housing, you do look at it that way. So we actually legally changed our name from Bristol, Tennessee Housing and Redevelopment Authority, and that's a mouthful for you. We changed that to simply Bristol Housing, and we changed our logo, and those changes were made with State Corporation Commission. So actually, Bristol, Tennessee Housing and Redevelopment Authority no longer exists. So with that said, I'd like to, since this is our first meeting, I wanted to do a brief history for everyone to bring you up to where we are now, because a lot of people just not aware of what the Housing Authority is and what we really do and where we came from and where we hopefully are going. So if you'll bear with me, I'll see if I can get this PowerPoint to work.
Great.
Okay.
Looks
Can you see
good.
that? Okay.
Yep, it's great.
Like I said, we used to have the state as our logo with the state seal and the city and that big long title. So we changed it and worked with the corporate image to come up with a much more friendly type thing, like the city has done with the new colored buses and all that. But basically, there's our motto: we serve the elderly, disabled, and low-income citizens of Bristol and Sullivan County, Tennessee. Our history: we were chartered in 1964 by the city. As far as housing authorities go, there are approximately 100 in the state of Tennessee. We're number 66, so we are very young as far as housing authorities go. And in contrast, the city of Bristol, Virginia Housing Authority came to be in 1938. So you can see they are the second oldest housing authority in the state of Virginia. So as far as housing authorities go, we are very, very young. That was part of Lyndon Johnson's urban renewal. And I was 6 years old, so I'll tell you what I did about it. But a lot of the properties that the city had acquired due to unpaid taxes and that sort of thing, that's where a lot of our housing units ended up, and that's why we're so scattered. Bristol, Virginia is very concentrated, like with Johnson Court and Rice Terrace, but we're all over town. And I'll show you a list of all the different streets we're on. But those units were built between 1965 and 1967. They're still in very, very good shape, and we have kept them up. In 1971, there was, well, in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a push for more housing units, but there was less and less property available. So the concept of high rises came about. So in 1971, our 10-story high rise located at 100 Ash Street, which is commonly known as Edgemont Tower, it opened, and it was designated strictly for the elderly and disabled. And for years and years, everybody thought it was an old folks home. But we actually have 18-year-olds living there, and we have 95-year-olds living there. Let's see, Fort Shelby came along 10 years later, and it's located at 400 Shelby Street, across from the Salvation Army and behind the post office. And that was part of another urban renewal project, which included the post office. This is my board of commissioners, all volunteers, wonderful folks to work with. Ella is my chair, and like I said, she's in her third term. Donna Felty, which most of you probably know, retired from King College. I think she's in her third term. She's a past chair. We have Scott Moorfield. He's with Luttrell Staffing. Jim Graham is a retired Bristol, Tennessee police officer. Raymond Hill lives at Fort Shelby, and he is our resident commissioner, which HUD requires that you have at least one resident or Section 8 tenant on your board. We have a very small staff. We have 15 employees. When I came here, I'm sorry, back up. When I came here, there were 32 employees, and a lot of people just didn't have a whole lot to do. And so I started trimming the staff down to cut payroll expenses. And we also we started contracting out services. What we call unit turnaround is when someone moves out of an apartment. We go in, we make all the necessary repairs, we clean it, we sanitize it, we repaint it, and do whatever's necessary to get that ready for the next tenant. And we call that unit turnaround. And we have gone with contractors for that rather than employees. And that has cut down the unit turnaround time from a week to 10 days to virtually 2 days, because contractors are in it to get in and make their money and move on to the next one. Another thing we did was we cut the mowing crews out. We have approximately 28 acres that we have to take care of. And I contract out the mowing and landscaping and that sort of thing. So we cut several staff members there. But like I say, we're a very small staff right now. As far as COVID-19, the managers and I are working currently at the office, keeping their social distancing. We have a couple of people that are able to actually work from home, but those that deal with clients in person, they're sitting at home, but they're being paid. We've got our maintenance staff in because we've got all sorts of projects and things that have been on the back burner, so they're not going into apartments unless it's an emergency. And they are doing things like pressure washing sidewalks and cleaning siding and installing handrails and just all sorts of things that can be done. We do administer 2 different housing programs here. Public housing, those are the units all around town, including the high rises that Bristol Housing actually owns. They are deeded to us. And if you live in one of those apartments, your rent is based off of 30% of your income. And currently for public housing, I want to give you the income limits. For a single member household, you can make up to $33,150 and still qualify for public housing. A family of 8 can make $62,450. The median is 4-member household, and that you can make $47,300. Now, once you're in, you can make additional monies, like if you get a promotion at work or better job, and you can actually go up to about $80,000 and still live in housing. But after that, we give notice and you have to move on and free up that apartment for someone else. For Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program, I'm sure some of you are familiar with that. For persons that don't wish to live in public housing for whatever reason and would rather rent from a landlord out in the private market, it's based on the same amount, 30 to 40% of their annual gross income. And we supplement that person's rent. They have to pay a portion to the landlord, and then the housing authority pays a portion of the rent based on their income. And we currently have 210 vouchers for that program. So we're able to help 210 households, not individuals, but households. And 10 of those vouchers are set aside for homeless veterans. And we work with the VA in Johnson City to try to, we haven't had a lot of luck with that program. Most of those veterans choose to live in Johnson City because of the proximity to the VA center. There's a picture of Edgemont Tower. I'm sure you've all driven by it 100 times. 118 apartments. It did open in 1971. It's a very good building to this day. Very sound, well built. Fort Shelby opened in 81. It originally had 110 apartments. Some of the apartments were 400 square feet, and a lot of people didn't want to live there because of the size of the units. And plus, Fort Shelby for a long time had a bad reputation, and we were having trouble keeping that building occupied. And at one point, we were down to 60% occupancy. So we took 36 of the efficiency apartments and combined those and turned them into 800 square foot, 1-bedroom units. So we went from 110 units down to 92. And the place has really cleaned up over the years, and we maintain 99 to 100% occupancy rate there. Family units, they're scattered all over town. As you can see, the different streets. We have 144 total apartments, and they're anywhere from a 1-bedroom to a 5-bedroom. They're located on East State Street, Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, Ash Street, Marion Avenue, 5th Street, College, Oakland, Carolina, Kentucky, and Virginia. So we are very scattered out, and that is a benefit at times because you don't get the I don't want to use the term clustering right now because of the COVID, but you don't typically get the problems if you don't have a lot of people crowded into those areas and people are more scattered out. As far as our funding, even though we're a political subdivision of the city, like the school system and BTS, we receive no city or state funding whatsoever. And this is basically where we get our income from. And a lot of people are surprised to see this figure, but this year we will receive in rent that our residents actually pay about 1.2 million, which exceeds what we get from the federal government, which is 900,000. CFPs is our capital funds program. This year, let's see, we've been awarded 625,000 for that. That's to make improvements to our facilities. Then other income is typically we have laundromats at our high rises and vending machines and that sort of thing. And so we do fairly well with that, taking about 75,000. So we operate on about 2.8 million per year as far as public housing goes. For the Section 8 program, HAP is housing assistance payments, and that comes directly from HUD to us, and that's 900,000, and that's what we pay the landlords with. And then we get 140,000 to support the staff. So that program, about a third of what we have in public housing, a little over 1 million. Something we got started back in 2004 that housing authorities are able to do to help redevelopment in the community is the tax increment financing. And I think all of you have been schooled on that pretty well recently. But I wanted to show you the involvement that the housing authority has had with that over the years. Our first project was back in 2005, and it was the West Ridge project. And Steve Johnson bought the old Walmart on West State. And originally that was slated to be a shopping center. That didn't last very long. But today, as you know, Teleperformance is located out there. And I don't know how many hundred employees they're up to, but that has worked out really well. That was a 15-year TIF. And I'm happy to say that our involvement with West Ridge just was completed last week. So, and that 15 years went by a lot quicker than I thought it would. So starting next tax year, this tax year, 2020, the city will get to retain almost $52,000 that the city has been turning over to me to make the mortgage, assist with the TIF and mortgage payment. So that one's done. Okay. And I know we didn't get a lot of sales tax out of that one like we had hoped, but with the number of jobs that Teleperformance provided, I think it's more than a wash. Southgate is the Food City and Lowe's project on Volunteer Parkway that you're all familiar with. We started that one in 2005. It was delayed for several reasons, and the TIF, parts of the TIF started in 2006 and parts in 2007 because of the delay on the Walgreens that was built. That TIF was, let me back up just a second. The West Ridge TIF was for $1.2 million. And like I said, it's over and done with. Southgate was a $4.9 million loan that the Housing Authority took on. It is slated to be completed March of 2022. So we've got 2 more years on that TIF. And then once that one is paid off, the city will realize well over $200,000 a year that you will not have, that you'll be able to retain. You won't, Tara won't have to turn it over to me. So we've either got a year and a half, or 2 years left on that one. We've got to get that worked out. That was also a Steve Johnson project. The villas at Lavinder Lane, that's a Mitch Cox project, and we were involved with that with the original 127 units that went in there. Let's see. That loan is for $970,000, and it is through Bank of Tennessee. And it is scheduled to mature January of 2030, but the way it's going, I think it's going to pay off at least 2 to 3 years earlier than that. So the property taxes will get to be retained by the city and county much sooner than what we anticipated. Okay. The E.W. King building downtown, Mr. Gregory's project. We were involved with that one as well. And that's a much smaller TIF, but it was downtown. So it was eligible for a TIF, even though the project was less than $1 million. And the loan on it is $475,000. It's a 15 years, so it's scheduled to mature December 31st of 2033. It's the same way. I think it's going to pay off much sooner, probably by 3 years. Okay, our latest project is the Tenneva Hotel, the Holiday Inn, located behind the Chamber of Commerce. We are going with Brian Deal and Dr. Slaughter. They are the developers on that project. Final TIF loan, it's through ECU, and it's going to be about $4.5 million on our part. And we, of course, it's they're going to start dipping into the TIF money, I think, in May. Dr. Slaughter's money has funded everything so far, but they'll start drawing down on the TIF money starting next month. And Brian Dill sent me an update. If you've been by there lately, things are finally taking shape. There's steel up for the first floor. All the plumbing and water in the slab are completed. Drainage issues, I think they've gotten resolved. So we're really excited about that one. For the city, it's set to mature in 2035. And I suspect it will pay off early too. We went very conservatively on that TIF. For the county, it will be 2040. They went 5 more years than the city did on it, but they get a portion of the TIF each year. This is why they chose to do that. Brian did tell me that he anticipates that he may be ready to open spring of next year if everything goes well. So that's really exciting. Okay, that completes my presentation. We're going to open it up now for questions, and or if you want me to, I can discuss the new repositioning that HUD is. Would you like me to do that, Bill?
Yes, Steve, that was when we talked earlier. That's that really shifts the business model for Bristol Housing, and I think it would be important to cover that with council.
Okay. We haven't made a lot of. We haven't done much with this, and we were getting ready to have some consultants come in and look at our housing authority and make recommendations. But with the COVID-19, everything got delayed because we were going to start this process in April. Some housing authorities have already done it, but basically HUD would like to get out of the public housing business. That's been a goal for years and years and years, and it comes from the U.S. Congress. Public housing is probably the least respected and most undesirable program in the United States, just to be perfectly honest with you. But the move is to convert public housing stock over to privately owned Section 8 voucher programs. And basically what that means is the housing authority, through a nonprofit that it forms, which we do have a nonprofit already, we've never utilized it, but we would basically take possession of the property. We would maintain all the units, but we would use Section 8 dollars rather than receiving public housing dollars. One of the other reasons that HUD is looking at doing this, public housing authorities, there are a lot of restrictions because HUD has maintains hold on the properties through deeds of trust, and we have to get their permission to do just about anything to our units, especially to do demolition or to sell or acquire and that sort of thing. So through a nonprofit housing authority, it basically becomes defederalized, and a housing authority can actually form its own business model and not pinned down with all the rules and regulations, or not nearly as many. There is a backlog in the United States right now of capital fund needs in housing authorities nationwide. I believe the last I heard was $2.6 billion, and those monies are just not available. We don't get enough money each year to keep our units up like we would like. Unfortunately, the high rises eat a lot of that money up because we've got elevators and fire systems and alarm systems and just so many things that have to be kept up. And that takes up the majority of our capital funding. So we don't get to spend a whole lot on our family units. A few years back, we did have a hailstorm. And so luckily we got all new roofs on all of our units. So that helped us to the tune of about $450,000. The last thing we did do to our family units, we were able to put in all new windows, and it dressed them up, and it's cut our utility consumption considerably. But in order to help housing authorities with that backlog of capital fund needs, if you convert to Section 8, all housing choice voucher, you are then able to go to a lending institution and borrow money, basically putting yourself in debt, but then you have the money and HUD guarantees those loans for 25 years. So does it make sense for us? I don't know. For some housing authorities, it does make sense. They've been able to borrow millions and millions of dollars and start making needed improvements. The inspectors and the HUD personnel that we've had in here over the years have been very complimentary to about our units because we have been able to keep them up. And I'm proud to say that this housing authority has $0 in debt. And we have a healthy reserve. And it's scary to think that we would borrow money, but it may come to that. So, like I said, basically public housing as we know it would go away. You really would not see a lot of changes except improvements that we might make. So it's kind of an internal thing about the way the money is handled. So I hope that makes sense to you all. That's my understanding of it so far. Some housing authorities have done it and are regretting it, and other housing authorities are making money hand over foot and are just happy as they can be.
Would you also, with doing that, if you had, say, a section that, say, there was a lot of upkeep, would you be able to dispose of those properties also under this if you chose?
Yes, sir, we would. It makes it much easier to either do demolition or to sell to a private developer, which Fort Shelby, for example, the last few years, I've had a couple of developers approach me about it. The big thing in demolition for a housing authority is I have to have a place. I currently have 92 households at Fort Shelby, for example. I have to have a place to put those. We can't just put them out on the street. Now, if we could buy another apartment complex, if we had a developer that would like to build apartments, it wouldn't necessarily have to be 92 units together. It could be like we operate now. They could be scattered over town, or we could buy a complex, on West State. We could buy a complex on East State. We could build. But as long as I would have a place, replacement housing is basically what it's called.
Right.
Does it make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Steve, with this type of change, potentially, does it take away the TIF programs, or would they continue as they are?
The TIF authority is given by the state of Tennessee. HUD has absolutely nothing to do with TIFs. And we have to be very careful to keep all of our accounting separated. It's not that they're not against it, but they certainly don't endorse it. And it's just kind of a sideline for housing authorities. A lot of cities have their own development authority, but it's a lot less expensive to let the housing authority do it. There's not a lot of housing authorities in the state of Tennessee that actually do redevelopment, but we're one of them.
Another question: of the 354 units, approximately how many people are living in those units?
I think right now we have about 800, because we have households, a mom and a dad and 5 kids, for example, in like a 5-bedroom unit. So it's between 750 and 800 right now. And like I said, we're maintaining our occupancy in all of our developments, 99 to 100%. We'll have 100% for a week or two, and then unfortunately Someone will have to go to a nursing home or they'll pass away. And the majority of our residents are elderly disabled, and that's an advantage, and it's also a disadvantage. Most housing authorities are more younger families.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions? So does Ella Kane, do you have anything to add, or?
I do not.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity though.
Okay. If there aren't other questions, and I know we had talked about doing some planning with you guys, or how do we look at what we have available in our community across the board, to just do a little planning for the future. And that some of that is waiting with this change with HUD and looking to see what kind of model fits us in Bristol. So we look forward to working at some point in the future when things get a little clearer going forward. So, and that has nothing to do with COVID-19. That has to do with just going through processes and getting those consultants to help and looking hard and looking at different scenarios and options. So anyway.
Okay, if I could add one thing, I wanted to thank Dr. May. I spoke with him earlier this week. There is the Wise County, Virginia Housing Authority. They have a small high-rise in Appalachia, Virginia, and they did have 2 positive cases of the COVID-19. So I've been in close contact. You know, a lot of housing authorities don't have high-rises. In fact, most don't, at least around here. But I've been watching that very closely. They declared that site a cluster, and it's under total lockdown right now. They have security. The local fire department is taking in medication, alcohol, groceries, anything the residents need, and they're not allowed to leave, and caregivers are not allowed to go in. The mail service is not allowed to go in. So we figured, and I think that's only for 32 apartments. And of course, between the 2 high rises, we've got 210. So like I said, I did touch base with Dr. May. He gave me some great ideas. We were able to get enough masks for all of our residents at the high rises. And starting today, we are distributing those. And I made announcements over the PA systems yesterday to let the residents know that we're trying to stay on top of this. And we're cutting down the number of people that can be in the smoking gazebos right now. We have also ordered more masks in the event that we would have to go under a quarantine situation. And Dr. May indicated that at Fort Shelby, for the number of apartments, if we had probably 3 positive cases, he would declare a cluster at that point, and the health department would come in and assist us with testing and guidance. As far as the logistics, that would be totally up to myself and my staff to take care of the residents at that point. And at Edgemont Tower, he indicated if we had 4 positives, that he would declare a cluster at that point. So we had a very good conversation, and my staff and I, we've been working on that this week to make sure we stay on top of it. And hopefully that won't happen, but we shall see. So far, my residents have been very good. Most of them are staying in their apartments, and you know, they don't want to catch it. So a lot of the congregating and socializing it's been minimized greatly, and I appreciate my residents for working with us on that.
Thank you. Yeah, any kind of congregate living is at high risk. So appreciate everything we can do. And you're sharing with us that we know for some folks, the caregivers who come in are critical to their being able to live independently. So anyway, appreciate your sharing, and appreciate what y'all do with for our residents, and that we're real proud of our housing here in Bristol. So thank you, and we'll see you again before too long. So
Great. Thank you all for inviting me today.
Thank you.
And go celebrate Fair Housing Month.
Thanks.
All right. Right. Thanks. All right, Mr. Sora, I think you're going to introduce the next topic.
Yes, as council will recall, during our February work session, we gave you a copy of a draft economic development incentive program. This is something that our economic development staff has worked on for the past several months. So Tom Anderson is with us this morning to give you a review of that. And again, this is a work in progress. So as council has, we'll certainly encourage your input. This is a program that you will need to support. And ultimately, when council feels comfortable, we'll want to adopt this by resolution. Tom?
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members, Bill, the staff, and the esteemed guests. I appreciate this opportunity. And as Bill mentioned, this is a work in progress, and we definitely need. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and get this up on the screen so everybody can see it. Okay. Trying to get this to go full screen. Well,
I think it's.
Can you hit slideshow?
That's what I'm saying, and it's not reacting, not responding. So.
At the top.
Let me try this again. Okay, it is not coming up the slideshow, so let me.
From the beginning, there you go.
Yeah, well, it's not responding, so.
There it goes. You got it.
Okay, so thank you. As Bill mentioned, this is something that was shared to you all, and it definitely is a working document, and we're going to need input from council members. I'm not doing this verbatim from the document that was sent to you all, but just in the incentive program, we've got extension of infrastructure, tax increment finance, pilots, and then the proposed strategic development areas that we had discussed back when we did the volunteer parkway study. So just diving into this, the extension of infrastructure, that's where water, sewer, electric, that's usually up to the city manager or the general manager, BTS. And there are some state resources plus local resources to extend that if it's appropriate. Getting into the tax increment finance, as you heard with the Housing and Redevelopment Authority, which is now just Bristol Housing, they do serve as a vehicle, but there's also the TIFs that run through the IDB. But what body actually oversees this? It all has a lot of the same goals in mind, where you're eliminating or preventing blight and blighted factor, looking to increase the economic tax base or the economic base, increase tax revenues, and then also try to build up existing residential, commercial, or industrial. And tax increment finance or TIFs, that's a very good vehicle to be able to do that. And to highlight some of the proposed in the draft policy, the tax increment, you have to prove that it's going to be a key element of the financing package. And then you're also going to have a pro forma provided by the developer, and it's going to be evaluated by either staff or a third party. And the third party, that's where you're going to have that gap analysis where they look at cap rates and some of these other things. But it's to prove the but-for clause, that the project would not go but for this TIF. And again, it's just where the TIF is going to cover that gap. That of course the project, the developer or the applicant has to demonstrate that they've got the ability to pull the project off successfully in the time frame allotted. And then also, when the decisions are being made, we would like to also include that that they have some equity. They need some skin in the game, which usually isn't that big of an ask, but we're looking for at least 15% to move forward. And that's just with, like I said, the developer having an equity position. But we also would like to suggest that the property, once everything's complete, that the assessed or the appraised assessed value increases by $3 million. And that is just to make sure that there's a significant increment, that we're going to see positive growth in the area that's being targeted, whether it's a redevelopment district or if it's an SDA that we're looking at, but I'll get into that. That's actually more of a pilot that functions like a TIF. But we do want to see the property values go up. Then also the TIF involved shouldn't exceed 25% of the total project. There should be commercial lenders that, there shouldn't be that big of a gap, I guess, that we have to look at the project itself. So again, that's not a large threshold, but it shouldn't exceed that 25%. And that's a best practice. Then looking to create jobs with wage scales. And initially we put in for TIFs with the average being at least 125% of the area wage median for the position. And I'll get into that a little bit later on how to measure that. But we're going to have to look at the 125% of the median, because in TIFs we have it as 125%, but for pilots we have it as 130%. So we probably need some commonality or an explanation of why we would want to do them differently. And as I mentioned, the vehicles would be either Bristol Housing or the IDB with the city. Getting into the payment in the pilot arrangements, determining factors, we're going to have a metric for the job creation and retention, capital expenditure, average wage, the type of the project, whether it's an existing industry that's expanding, a headquarters, are they going to locate in an area that we would like to see them, in this case, have an admin, say downtown in our central business district, and then have an unusual benefit to the community. This is a discretionary type score, type weight, where if it's a target industry that we'd like to see in our area, or they have a special feature where they may do work-based learning, partner with the school systems, have some kind of an arrangement with the community college or one of the other higher ed university, something in this area, but something that's an unusual benefit to our community. We'd like to see that's actually weighed and measured. Now this actually is a chart that's in the document that you guys got, I guess, in February. And that actually shows scores for different things. So the top boxes, you have the job creation or retention, and the numbers on the left, up to 10, up 11 to 25, those are actual jobs. And then on the right side of the column is the points associated with that metric. So whether it's capital expenditure, where you've got weighted values on that, and then you have the local impacts, which is going to be the average wage. In this case, it's 130% of median. Then the headquarters, expanding existing businesses, locating admin downtown, and then the unusual benefit, the other way. So just to recognize our Zoom meetings, I made up Project Zoom. So in this case, say there's 35 new jobs, that would get 25 points. 3.5 million investment, that would get 40 points. It's an expansion of existing business, so there's 10 points there. And then the average wage is $19.50 an hour. That didn't get any score because it does not meet the metric of 130% of the median wage. And in this case, we use the MSA. In our MSA, the median wage or income is $18.57 an hour, which is only 105% of the median. So the total points available, and then I'm going to show where we got some of these metrics from, or how to measure them from the databases. But like I said, the 75 points. But before we get to the score sheet, here's one of the data sources. It actually came from HUD. And it's based on some of the Section 8 housing. And I know this is kind of a crude circle, but that's how we got it sent to us. But 80% of the median income for one person was $30,900. And of course, doing the math and bringing that up to 100%, that is actually the median income, which is the $18.57 per hour. That came from HUD. And that's obviously the 2019 summary. But the wages to get a score would have had to have been $24.14 an hour, which is, $50,000 a year. And going to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, just say for a metal and plastic machine worker, which is, we'll say Project Zoom weighs heavily on that. The median wage for that position is $17.35 an hour. So when you look at that, they're still paying quite a bit more, but it is still not 130% of the median. So we would actually be able to look at that metric for the occupations. This is available to everybody. It's the Occupational Outlook Handbook through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So what we would do is we would reference a database anytime going forward, so we can kind of make sure that the playing field is level, whether it's HUD for just a general median income, or if we want to go occupation specific. So that 75 will score, you'll get a 75% pilot, which is the payment in lieu of the tax agreement. So essentially 75% of their taxes would be abated for 5 years. So if you sit there and think that someone made an investment and their tax bill is $100,000 a year, they're going to only have to pay $25,000. So they're going to get a $75,000 abatement for 5 years. That's a pretty significant investment that allows the city to put skin in the game, but it also is based on performance. It's not just gratis. And if you also notice that there's not a recommendation to ever give 100%, that we would always maintain some growth. So the maximum percentage would be a 95% pilot for 5 years. And then if it's an extraordinary project, getting back to the score sheet, where you would actually get over 100 points because they're going to hire a lot more people. They're going to invest a lot more money. They may locate downtown and expand a business. They may actually get over 100. And if they do get over 100, you're looking at a 5-year pilot of 95%, and then another 5 years where if they continue on the growth pattern that they gave us, that there would be a 50% abatement for another 5 years. All of these would be reviewed annually, and there would be clawbacks where if they didn't hit a performance measure, it would shift the amount of the pilot. And it's something that we would just have to keep up with. But I think having performance-based is very important to us going forward. Getting into the proposed strategic development areas. You all remember we did a presentation, or I did a presentation explaining these areas along Volunteer Parkway. We identified 4 that could use some special attention, and it would be something that we may want to incent to try to get a mixed use development, which would be it's a combination of retail, commercial, could be back office, and it's going to be residential. And we would be able to use the pilot feature, but it would be calculated much like tax increment finance. There would be kind of a gap analysis where we would see that an incentive needs to be made because they're going to take the extra investment to create this space in an area that City Council wants to see developed. And if you recall the map, we have this is over near where the Days Inn. That's Lavender Lane, but this is over where Big Lots and all that area is. Actually, no, that's actually the professional business park. This is getting over where, excuse me, I guess where Big Lots, nope, I'm got it backwards. Okay. This is Lavender Lane and Big Lots, and this one is over here where the professional office park is. The green that you see, those are actually existing redevelopment districts. And then coming down here to number 4, that actually goes on both sides of Volunteer Parkway. This is where the old Friendship Ford property was. There's property back behind it that's controllable. And then you also have a lot of acreage on this side of Volunteer Parkway, which could be developed. Those areas from the study came back to us as either underutilized or they would be targeted for development. So we may want to treat these with this incentive. When you sit and look at the performance metrics, it's very similar to the manufacturing one that we did for a pilot. It has to be a new business, new to Bristol. If it's not new to Bristol, it needs to be, if it has to relocate, it's because they've outgrown the space that they're in and there's nowhere else for them to go. So they would then expand, but they would still be within the city limits. But it's going to have to be significant expansion. We'll have to set the parameters on that, much like the border region where it has to be 35% larger. We would have a metric like that. But it also has to increase the appraised value. That's that $3 million. It's going to have a significant increase in property value for us to want to give this incentive. We would also score the increase of local option sales tax. We do have a way to measure that. We would do it as an aggregate and not do situs data, so it would be done as an accumulative. And then there may be some special features where they may do enhanced aesthetics, just rock walls and waterfalls and things that we don't necessarily require, but it's going to add to the development itself. Would they make it walkable? Would they tie it into some of our greenways? Would they have, a dog park? Would they, just what will they do to enhance that beyond what we would ask for them to do or what the zoning regs would require? And then there's also a feature where if there's ancillary high-end development, say you have a very nice commercial retail kind of development that you're going to have some high-end jobs in, well, maybe there's a neighborhood that would end up being built in close proximity as a direct relation to this development. So we'd want to score some points for that, but it wouldn't be for the housing development, it would be for the mixed use development. And then going back to the wages, basically as an aggregate, wages being above the median, and that would get a weighted score too. So you're looking at pilots, which means you've got a 10-year without having to go and ask for special permission. We can go up to 10 years with payment in lieu of tax. So if somebody scores, again, we'll just use the 75 number. That would give them a pilot for 7 years, 75%. And that money, they still have to pay the property tax, but then that 75% of their tax burden would actually go to settle a debt. So it would be a payment in lieu of tax agreement. So we would maintain 25%, so we would see growth, but that increment that was created above the base tax would then go to settle a debt. So it would function a lot like a TIF, but it would actually be a pilot, and it would run through the Industrial Development Board. So that was a lot of information very quickly, but again, as Bill mentioned, this is a working document. Hopefully you all have done some notes in the margins, and you would like for us to incorporate, some of your ideas or direction or some other things. But anyway, open for questions or comments or any other area or direction you'd like us to go.
Thank you, Tom, for going through that. And as we grow and progress, becoming a little more professional and putting more things down, so it's clearer for folks who are interested in developing, also clearer for us to be able to make decisions. So as a first draft, appreciate your going through it. Are there questions from council?
Good job.
Right. Yeah. So
Margaret, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to point out, this is also something that once you guys establish the policy, it could be shared with all of our partners, whether it's BTS and April, or if it's Clay Walker and his group. it would allow them to actually go when they meet with the prospect and give an idea of what the city would do. If they perform to a certain level, it would give a score sheet, where they could actually go out, and it's not negotiating at that point. It's where they could say, okay, you would be eligible, if you all meet these conditions. So it actually will allow us to have more people out there selling our community with confidence, knowing that the city, if they do certain things, the city will do certain things, and we will have that public-private partnership.
Tom, I do have a question of looking back. Have you looked at with some of the projects that have been done in the past? Are there any that say would not have happened if we were going under this new policy? Have you looked at any of that?
Yeah, we did review some of those. There's a lot of them that are about to expire, but they would all have qualified. But they're getting 100%, whether it's on equipment or real. They're getting 100% for a determined amount of time. Most of them are 5 years.
Right.
And they do have metrics that they have to hit, but this would be a way to quantify and not just qualify the pilot, moving forward. I think it's just a responsible thing to do, but the ones that have been given would have qualified anyway.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a project we need to get going on, put this into play, because like you said, Tom, there's a lot of folks out there that could be, selling our product for us.
Yep.
Tom, we talked about the pilot that acts like a TIF. What is the reason we would, or let me ask this, if a developer wanted to use a TIF instead of a pilot, is there an advantage there, a disadvantage there, or can you explain the difference, why we wouldn't go with the TIF versus
because they're not TIF districts. They're not TIF districts, and that's where we had recommended the strategic development areas. And if you want, we would be able to go through an economic impact study, and that study would then identify the districts, much like they did with the Pinnacle. That TIF is going through the Industrial Development Board because there was an economic impact study done. It was adopted by the state of Tennessee. It's just a lot more hoops. We keep a lot more local control if we do identify the strategic development areas. And it could be more than just Volunteer Parkway. You guys could identify other areas of the city that you want to see develop in this mixed use type development. It's going to build the residential piece. It's going to build the commercial piece, and it's going to build the ability to garner more local option sales tax. And that's the reason using it as a pilot. It reduces the amount of years. However, it keeps local control, and it keeps us from having to do the economic impact study in each of these areas. So you're talking about a longer process. Not that you wouldn't have anything different happen on the other end, but it would allow more local control, and you all can set the parameters, and you could take it away, just with a simple resolution. So it gives more control for council.
Is there, I was just going to follow up and ask, so is there, if you were to find areas where either one would work, so you got the redevelopment TIFs, which we're talking about blight and that kind of thing. You've got the economic TIFs like we did for the Pinnacle. So in essence, what for the developer, what is the difference? Can you tell us the difference for the developer on each of those scenarios?
Well, the difference would be it's a longer term where our TIFs they can go up to 20 years. We tend to keep it at 15. Statutorily, they could go up to 20. So it just depends if it's a larger project, much like the Pinnacle, that you've got a lot of development costs, you may not be able to get that recouped in under 10 years. So that's where, if it's a large development, then it may behoove us to do the impact study and then set a longer term, because the property values are going to be increased so much they'll be able to pay themselves back for the gap, if you will.
So we could go down that. We could go down the TIF road if we.
Oh, that tool's always there. It's just going through the process.
Right.
Okay,
And
Lee.
what I was going to say is that I think some of the great confusion in the past about TIF versus pilot is what Tom has mentioned a couple of times now is the impactfulness of the project. If a project it's a great project, maybe it's a relocation, something that is a great project to the community, but it doesn't have the necessary underlying impact basis, then it would not, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, it would not then fall into that category. And I think in the past, that has been a lot of the misunderstanding is that that impact study is very important and it does have to reach that level of extraordinary impact. Would that be a fair assessment, Tom?
Yeah, it is. It's using the terms, moving the needle, it shows that you have to truly move the needle. And then the impact study will show, here's your baseline. And then you can also project what you anticipate the region to develop into. And, it's a lot more metrics and a lot more measuring, but it also involves the county. So if you truly want to maximize tax increment finance, you're going to have to get the county to adopt the same study. And where pilot would be, it's industrial development board that would make the decision to remove a percentage of the taxes off of the tax rolls. So you would still be able to maximize the increment, but it doesn't necessarily require the county's input unless it's over 10 years.
And along with all of that, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, there would be clawback provisions so that if those metrics weren't met, the city and the county, if they were involved, would have those clawback opportunities.
Right. If they didn't meet the metrics, that they would come back on the tax rolls at whatever percentage that they didn't meet. And we would just go back to the score sheet. So instead of 75%, they may get 50%.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So Tom, thank you. Do you have more?
Yeah, I've got just one more thing. Bill had asked me to kind of bring you up to speed on some of the things that the team is doing through economic development plus BTS networks, the state, and I believe in Bristol. The flyer that's there, that actually went out. We put this together, and each of those buttons are an active hyperlink. And it's a PDF that you can put on, say, your desktop or your computer, but if you could click on any of those, it takes you directly to the resource that's in the big button. We made it very simplistic, where if you click on Launch Tennessee, that takes you to the CrowdShare platform that allows business to business, and it shows there may be a hospital in Memphis needing something that's made up here in Bristol. It allows that to connect. Plus, it also goes to our landing page for the COVID-19 for our local business sources. So this is something that's gone out to commercial and industrial entities, if you will, and we're getting some positive feedback. They like this because it's not 2 paragraphs with a hyperlink in the middle. It allows them to go, if they want to go to the chamber, U.S. Chamber for their resources or small business administration. If they need assistance, they can go to the Tennessee Small Business Development Center. Then the very top of the page, it just says, click here for assistance, and then they will assign a counselor to you. So it's very clean, it's very simple, and it's something that we can update if things change, but it is a resource that we're sharing right now. And it's actually, anybody would like it. We're going to give it to John, obviously, John Luttrell. Matt and I came up with the concept and got all the mechanics of it, and then John made it make sense and made it very attractive. And at the bottom, you'll see the logos of our partners. If you click those, it goes to our emails. So it allows anybody to ask us questions. And since our team really doesn't have a wrong door, if you will, so if they contact April, April will share with the rest of us. If they contact me, I'll share with the rest. We just make sure that people aren't overburdened on any kind of bureaucracy so they can get directly to the people that'll give them help. And the other part that we're doing is we're working we stay in touch, the team stay in touch to make sure that we're not inundating businesses with welfare check calls to make sure everybody's doing okay. So if Clay or his team calls, April may not, but he's asking questions on what's their status, are there anything that they need, to try to plug them into resources. There's a lot of businesses that have furloughed some of their people. They may not have shuttered, but they've shut down certain lines, and it could be because of supply chain interruption, or it could be just because no one's wanting their product. But we're talking to them, so when it is time to go, we're working on, Matt and I are working, Matt's actually spearheading it, a virtual hiring expo, if you will. And what that's supposed to do is kind of queue up the workforce. If you just kind of picture horses in the gate at the beginning of a horse race, there's a lot of them that are very antsy and ready to go. And when those gates open, they come flying out. That's kind of where we want to be. And we want to make sure that the pipeline goes to the proper businesses. So the businesses that are attempting to call their people back, some of them may find other work. It's just one of those things that may come up, and some people may be underemployed and may be using this as a time to get certifications and upskill, so they may want a better job. So anyway, we're trying to connect and play a matchmaker, doing it now to where once this is over and we're allowed to come back out in the sunshine and supply chains are reestablished and people start working again, that they'll have jobs waiting for them. So that's something that we're actively doing. So
great. I think it'd be great if you'll email the PDF,
yeah, you'll get all this and the resource page. I'll make sure that gets to all of you.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Then we can share it when we have questions. Anybody have any questions? Tom, thank you. We appreciate your work on this, and also it's good to hear optimism for life after COVID. You're
there one day
providing that vision for us, so we really appreciate it. So okay, I think that's at the end of our official agenda, but Mr. Sora, do you have comments first? And also, I think you were going to ask for another couple of updates.
Yes, Mayor, first of all, I'd like to go back to Tom's presentation. If council would like more time to study the EDIP, then we can do that. If council is comfortable with the program as was presented today, then I can bring that forward at our May 5th City Council meeting for formal adoption, or we can do this later in the year. It's just the pleasure of council. I just need some direction.
I'd like another week to read through it, but I think at the end of another week, I'll be good. I just wanted a little more time to read through it and really refresh.
So if we say we're to go ahead to put it on the May agenda, that gives us still, we've got another meeting in between. If we have more questions or want to talk about it a little bit, we could do that on the 28th. Is that correct, Mr. Zora?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that sounds great.
All right. Moving along then on additional comments, at our Monday, April 20th meeting, as you recall, we have a call meeting for 9 a.m. At that, we've got two items on that agenda. One will be a presentation from the Tennessee Commissioner of Tourism, Commissioner Azale, and Beth Reinhardt will also be there for question and answer. It's my understanding that council has heard her Discover Bristol presentation along with Bristol, Virginia's City Council in March. So this would, but what was missing during that time is an opportunity for Commissioner Azale to address council on his perspectives on tourism and the value to our local economy, especially Bristol's. So he will be here. Beth will also be participating in that, and will be ready for the question and answer session of that. Or if she has any additional information to share beyond what was presented earlier, then she's certainly welcome to do that. Next item on the agenda will be a presentation from McGill and Associates. This will be dealing with our bike and pedestrian preliminary engineering report. As council will recall, earlier in this fiscal year, this firm was engaged. They prepared the initial plan in terms of the layouts as far as the potential routes and studies and so forth, and that was a couple of years ago. What they've done recently is a preliminary engineering report for the first phase that would extend our trail system from Rooster Front Park in phases to Bristol Motor Speedway. So they will give you that presentation. Again, it's going to be a Zoom presentation, and then we'll talk further about how we advance that project. At April 28th, if you'll recall, last month we canceled our comprehensive plan presentation due to the COVID-19 virus. We will pick that up on April the 28th. We will not have a budget presentation at that time. We're still very much in flux as far as the budget goes. We've had to go back and look at our capital improvement plan, our goals and objectives, and we're still trying to refine revenues. And we get different pieces of information almost on a daily basis as to what sales tax looks like, and a lot of that I have shared with you just in terms of what the University of Tennessee's Howard H. Baker Jr. Public Policy program has forecast, and this is the same team of experts that's advising the governor's staff on what state sales tax will look like in the coming year. So I'm thinking that a budget presentation will be in late May. I'm hopeful that we can do a presentation in a format different from this, that we'll be at a different point in where we are, and we can, if nothing else, we can have a smaller group gather at the Nature Center in the work in the classroom space there and practice our social distancing. But that's such an in-depth presentation. If you recall, we run multiple screens. It would be very difficult to have that kind of a presentation in a Zoom format. So I'm thinking in late March, probably the March work session. And then that would set us up from a calendar standpoint to consider first read in June and then second reading later in June. That would allow us to keep pace with what is at least currently the expectation from the comptroller's office. I have not heard of any relief as far as having that document completed by June 30th. If we do, then we can revisit that issue. Well, again, we'll have our May 5th meeting. My guess is that will still be a virtual meeting that using a Zoom format. In terms of operations, call volume with our police department is actually down, but the nature of the calls, especially those dealing with domestic issues, not necessarily domestic violence as much as disputes, unwanted visitors, verbal threats, those types of calls are up, while overall call volume is down. On the fire department side, while we saw initially a downturn in call volume, that's returned pretty much in the last week to the normal counts that we would see. We did have one call earlier this week that we used the PPE based on the type of call it was, but we're not seeing a lot of those types of calls so far. Normal city operations with our public works department. And as we think, you can turn on any TV or pick up any periodical, and we talk about organizations. What is it? What is the future look? What is the rollout look post COVID-19 timeline? I think fortunately for us as an organization, most citizens haven't seen the change. We've continued to provide services. We're a little different in terms of City Hall. We're still in a lockdown mode there, but people have learned how to deal with us electronically or through drop boxes, and so I'm unaware of problems if they exist in that type of operational structure. So I think whenever the opening occurs, as far as our services, with the exception of Parks and Recreation, and I'm going to ask Terry to talk a little bit about that momentarily,
But with the exception of that, most citizens haven't noticed anything. We're still collecting the same type of solid waste that we did this time last year. We're still patching potholes. We're still mowing parks. We're still mowing medians. We're still doing those things in providing municipal services that we're known for. So I don't see a great shift in there. We'll certainly, as conditions warrant, we'll open City Hall back up. We'll open other facilities back up. But those areas in Parks and Recreation those are the ones that have been impacted the most through COVID-19. As you're aware, Slater Center's been closed. Those program opportunities closed several weeks ago. As we begin to look forward to this post-COVID-19 era, those are the areas that I think our citizens will notice most. And with that, I want to ask Terry to talk, while we don't know definitively timelines at this point, we do know how we'll roll out and the different elements from farmers market to youth leagues to senior programs to Slater Center and so forth. But Terry, if you'll address those and give City Council an opportunity to ask some questions about that, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely. So first with the farmers market, that's probably what we're getting the most conversation about right now. Typically the market opens the first Saturday in May. Mike, who's our market manager, was actually in a Zoom meeting yesterday with 26 markets representing Northeast Tennessee. And a lot of that talk was revolved around a paper that came out from the UT Extension Office and the information that we've been getting from the Department of Ag. There's currently three markets open that we're aware of in Tennessee. Two of those are indoor markets. One of those is Johnson County, which is a very small market. The concerns really are policing with an outdoor market. So the conversation that they had yesterday, I think everybody's pretty much in agreement to kind of use Memorial Day as a target opening. Give us a few more weeks to see how things go. We're early in the market season where you'd mostly see greens and some potatoes and a few other things. Kingsport did confirm yesterday they've set on that Memorial Day weekend as their target, and the other 24 markets in that meeting are also looking at either the 23rd or the 30th as their target. Now, obviously, that can shift either direction based on what happens in those communities over the next couple of weeks. In the interim, Mike is contacting all of our farmers, all of our growers, and checking to see if they have an interest in us using our Facebook page to post their information and contact numbers if people want to reach out directly for their produce and have meetings or go to their farm, so we can keep those relationships and give them opportunities. And then we'll keep working with the Department of Ag and our local market managers group for other opportunities as things change. So that's kind of where we're at on the farmers market. And then Mr. Sore mentioned starting up programs. I mean, obviously we have no clue on time, but there's some things that we have to think about, like the swimming pool. You all know that each year we spend 3 to 4 weeks trying to bring the pool back online, repairing concrete, repainting, overhauling pumps and those type of things. We've put all that on hold for right now. I've not ordered the paint. We've not started that process. Because probably wouldn't be a wise use of money at this point. The other issue we have, the bigger fear is, if we're end of May, 1st of June, opening the pool or even later, we're going to have an employee problem. We're not going to be able to get our guards. We're not going to be able to get staffed up. So right now we've just put the pool on hold until we know more, because we can control that. The Slater Center, again, when the all clear is given and we, with our health department, decide that function is safe, we have scrubbed this building, still are scrubbing this building top to bottom. We've stripped and waxed our floors. We've bleached out our restrooms. We're touching up paint. We're fixing scrapes and bumps. So this building and staff will be ready to go whenever that takes place. Some of our outdoor programs, paddle boats, trains, those can stand up relatively quick, but those are all summer staff that we have not brought on. So we'll have a window of trying to staff up those positions. and timing on that will be critical as to whether we can find that staff and get that staff processed and brought on. We can use our current full-time staff to fill some of the gaps while we're getting up, but we don't have enough staff to cover the full hours. We're looking at things like NJTL. Those are our internal programs that we can shift those dates. We can do NJTL at the end of summer rather than the beginning of summer like normal. So those programs we can shift. We've spent a ton of time on our ball fields. If you see our ball fields right now, our Little League fields, they're in better shape than they've ever been, and we're continuing to work on those. The problem is what we're hearing from Little League right now is there's not enough time to have any kind of season to prepare for their Little League World Series. So they don't know what they're going to do. We're probably looking at, if anything, just a fall ball through Little League. And fall ball is really just a practice league, if you will. Obviously, all of your school programs, Rotary Field, all those have been suspended. So we're taking care of everything. We're updating. We're using this opportunity to make things better. So we're ready. It's just, getting the staffing together and getting things rolling. But we'll be ready when the time comes. We're business as usual on most things, and just waiting for the public to come back.
Thank you. Anybody have questions for Terry? All that's really good to hear. There's some things that we don't like to hear, but great to hear what y'all are doing and being prepared. And I'm really glad for the work on the farmers market, and hoping that, since that is allowed under the Safer at Home, and we could spread out and do some different things. And we certainly don't want to lose those relationships. And personally, I need to buy some plants from my farmers. So hoping, and that's usually mid to late May or so for doing that. So hopefully the timing will be just about right. So if we're able to stick to that Memorial Weekend opening. So appreciate everybody's work on that. Please express to our farmers, we appreciate them for farmers market, and all of your staff for everything that you're working on. Anybody else?
I do have one last item, Mayor. As I mentioned on our April 20th and 28th meeting, we had those agenda items. Please give me some direction if you all want to hear from Department of Health on either of those dates, or give me some direction on other agenda items that you would like to have.
I would think that we just leave, I'll go to you in a second, but the 20th is only a few days away, and that's when our community testing begins. So I think either wait until the 28th or even the May meeting, unless there's major changes that with increases in numbers or anything that we really need, that either the 28th or our May meeting. What are you thinking, Lee?
Well, I was just going to say that I think that as we get closer to the 30th, when the governor will either begin to open or make that known, or to extend his declaration, I think it would be good to know how the testing's going, where we are, just a brief. I know they're inundated with calls, and by this opportunity, it gives them a chance to communicate in a broader sense, specifically to the community. So I would like to hear from them on the 28th as to how the testing is going and where we are with our caseload.
I think the 28th would be a good time as well.
Okay, so we can do 28th and maybe not the May date unless there's changes. So that skip a week and then hear from them later in May, or depending on what our schedule is. So does that help with direction, Mr. Sora?
Very much so. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And council comments, announcements, etc.
I'll just make a quick comment. I think we've had a lot of discussion about our charter and this, that, and the other in relation to it. And I think we have a great process that we legislate by committee. We have a mayor, as Margaret told me when I first had the opportunity to serve as mayor, the mayor acts as our spokesperson, and most of the decision making is on council. When we found ourselves in this situation of disaster and emergencies, that hasn't necessarily followed through with that philosophy. Margaret's been very good to speak with us about things as they've come up, but there's a little housekeeping measure that I think we might be interested in taking a look at. We received legal memorandum 20-07 on March 20th, which laid out state and local law regarding declaration of emergency. One thing that was not in there is something that Kingsport had done some time ago as an ordinance overlay. I've emailed this to everyone, and it is Article 2. And if you go down and look at Section 3421, it discusses the proclamation of the state of emergency. If you go over to Section 3423, it discusses 3421 and 3422 in detail. And all that this does is provide an overlay to the mayor making the declaration, and it's subject to the approval by the board, in Kingsport's case, of mayor and alderman. And if approved, if approval has not been given prior to such actions, the board of mayor and alderman will meet within 72 hours. And in this day of electronic meetings, that shouldn't be a problem, after the proclamation of the state of emergency, in order to approve or disapprove such actions. And I think because of the way that our legislative body is elected and determined, because we have an appointed mayor, and this has nothing to do with Margaret per se. I'm talking about general operating procedures, basic housekeeping, that it then follows through with the way that our legislative actions are set. And so I would just like to put this out there for your consideration. We don't have to go back into the charter to do this. This is a code of ordinance, and it would simply provide an overlay.
Okay. Anybody have other, and we can ask our attorney to weigh in. Are people interested in learning more, pursuing, seeing if it's something we can do without a major, without an act of Congress? If we can do it as an ordinance, which is a 2 reading process to do that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it doesn't do anything. It just gives another, it's basically checks and balances that we're putting in place. And I would definitely like to take a look at it, I think.
I assume that there are other communities that do this the same way as well. I will point out that we don't know that our ability to hold electronic meetings is going to hold after this that was approved, not immediately. So we don't know if that's going to be a new tool for us to be able to do, or whether that once the emergency status is lifted, that we are not given that privilege. We certainly have learned how to do it, and I feel pretty good about our public input, that I've heard some programs or had some articles where some communities are struggling how to have that public input. We also have not experienced that process happening. So anyway, but okay. So we've got a couple folks, Chad, Malin.
Yeah, I was just gonna, Danielle, if you give us some clarity on it, I think it's good as well. How would the process? I'd like to know how the process would be, how it would work, Danielle, if you could explain.
How the approval would work, or how
in other words, is first reading today, second reading, how would that work?
Today, you don't have anything in front of you to read. So today, we couldn't have first reading of an ordinance today. If you want to go in this direction, I'd have to draft an ordinance, and it would have to come before you on first reading. Because you probably are not going to wait until your May regular business meeting, this would be a special called meeting, and the public would have to have notice per our charter of at least 24 hours. You'd have to have published notice. And your usual practice is to make the ordinance available to the public several days beforehand. So you'd be looking at having your first reading sometime next week. Possibly you could have it Monday if you've already got that meeting scheduled. Because it's an ordinance, it has to be approved on 2 readings, and they have to be a week apart. By charter, there's a provision in there that says that the first reading has to be a week from the second reading. Ordinarily, ordinances are effective after 17 days, but if it's an emergency and council finds that it's an emergency, then the ordinance can be effective immediately.
So can we make that determination? So if we consider all of this a time of emergency, so if we followed the schedule of the 20th, and then if we were to have a called meeting on the 28th with our, in combination with work session, part of that could say that it takes effect immediately?
That would be part of the ordinance, is the ordinance would say itself that you're finding that it's an emergency, and then if you've got 3 people voting for that, then you've found the emergency need for that.
And then once it's in place, then we have it just like Kingsport has it in place, that any future actions that's how we would follow.
It becomes part of your code of ordinances. I will say that there probably are other communities that have this. Kingsport has a 72-hour provision. Clarksville, just doing some quick research, they have 7 days. And so the mayor declares a state of emergency that's effective for 7 days. And then in order for it to be extended, there has to be approval of their board of mayor and aldermen. Franklin, the mayor can declare the state of emergency. The board of mayor and aldermen can extend that to up to 90 days or can shorten the period. So they've got another kind of mechanism. There may be other ways out there that I haven't run across. I could do a survey of other municipal attorneys and see what their ordinances say about these states of emergency and what kind of oversight they have, if any, and how long those timeframes are. But that's up to you all if you want me to do that work.
Right.
I think we need to do more homework other than just making a decision right now. We need to understand it just a little bit more, make sure there's no other pros or cons to this.
I mean, I would like to
it's always good.
And I mean, you can take that time, but to go ahead and add it to the next meeting so that it is out there, and that would give you time, Malin, to look at the process and to have at least where we've got a first reading. That would be my thought.
So if we asked Danielle to prepare something she could do, she's already done some quick research. She could provide any additional she has time for, but then if we then have a week till the next reading, there's still opportunity can we amend it on a second reading, Danielle, if it's the length of time?
You can amend it between first, when you talk about it on your first reading, yes. You can amend it at either reading.
Right. So that wouldn't extend the time frame or anything by learning something new and tweaking it. So
it doesn't have to.
Right. Okay. So we can keep that schedule then if that works with your schedule, Danielle, to have something for us Monday, that would be great. And then at whatever point, maybe if we're going to have to advertise for the 28th, maybe on Monday, we want to talk a little bit more what our schedule might be going forward, so that if there's opportunity to advertise more than one meeting at a time to save any money or whatever would be something we could do.
So our meeting on the 20th is already advertised as a call meeting, so we can add that to the agenda. We would need to, the meeting on the 28th was advertised initially as a work session, so we'll need to change that to a call meeting in advance of that. But that would be the only advertisement as long as we stayed on those timelines.
Right. Okay. All right. Anybody else have things they want to add or talk about?
Just a question. Are we still meeting on the 23rd for a briefing and, for any presentations, or have we decided not to meet on that date?
I think we decided last week not to meet on the 23rd, that we would meet on this Monday, next Tuesday, if that's okay.
If we had some kind of pressing developments, though, we could meet on the 23rd. We could schedule that Monday at our meeting for a meeting on the 23rd if we had to. Is that correct?
That's it. I think so.
We would need to properly advertise it. I think we would have time if you decided to do that and we were able to get it advertised in Tuesday's paper, then you could do that.
Right. So, okay. Any other things from council? I
have just one brief thing, Margaret. Okay. Our meeting today, I think, has provided us all with a lot of hope. And, one thing that we've talked about, look for the opportunities. We've seen opportunity through the housing department, Bristol Housing. We've seen opportunity through economic development, very hopeful there. We've seen opportunity through Parks and Rec and the presentations that are coming up. And I just think it's really important that we realize we're in a tough spot right now, and we've got a lot of people out of work that are in a tough spot. But we as a council, I think, and staff especially, continue to look for those opportunities. So, I appreciate all of that.
Great, thank you. I'll report real quick on census. I got an email this morning that as of yesterday, that Bristol is at a 52.6 return, and that compares with the state of 48.9 and national of 49.1. So pretty excited. And also for we look pretty good for our area. Washington County is 56.7, Johnson City is 50.4. And Sullivan County is down a little bit at 47.5. But at 52.6, we're good. I didn't look up, we're doing well. We're not done yet. I did not look up Bristol, Virginia. They were 2 or 3 points ahead of us. So hoping that they're keeping up as well with their return. So I encourage people to get that turned in. If you do it online, if you use the number that you received in the mail, that means you will no longer receive contacts from the mail. Also, the mailed out full forms are starting to come out. So if you have not completed online, then folks should be getting a form that they can do and mail back in. So just reminding everybody of how important that is. Also, just I have not done my utility training. I think Malin said he's going through his, but as we might have some time to do that, which I think hopefully it's clear for those of us who've had the first 12 hours that we don't have to do the full 12 hours for our continuing. But that's something that's good to do. Also, I've watched several webinars that have been excellent. National League of Cities has webinars, and yes, who forgot to take the phone out. And also for Planning Commission, the Maryland Department of Planning and Smart Growth has great opportunities, and those are interesting whether you're on Planning Commission or not. There's some really good webinars. So those are several that are good to at this time, if we have a little bit more opportunity to take time to do stuff. Also, just to keep y'all up a little bit, I am going to be joining a call with the Northeast Tennessee Association of Realtors. They wanted a call with the mayors, so that started at 10:30. So I'll be calling in. They wanted to give an update for folks, so I'll share with y'all what I learned during that meeting. So anybody else have anything to add? Thank our staff for giving us some semblance of business as usual, which we know it is lot, but we do get some opportunities to keep learning and to keep looking at how we move forward. So with that, we can finish up our meeting and I'll call it adjourned. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.